Hello and welcome to today's video. Today is my first update for my pan, this Eyeshadows project pan. This was started by Alexy a long time ago here on YouTube, and she actually brought this project back for herself this year, which I'm super excited to watch her work on this. But yes, this is an eyeshadow focused project pan, and basically you can kind of set your own rules. I'm working on 5 different shadows that I have to show you progress on today, so why don't we go ahead and get into it. Okay, as we get started, I think I decided I want to show you items that I use most frequently to less frequently over the past month, and I have some good progress for you. Now, this was my first time doing an eyeshadow project pan, and boy was it a learning curve for me. I think my biggest mindset adjustment has been these eyeshadows are not typically something that you're going to hit goal on in a month, like a Super Shock shadow. I know I can hit goal on those in a month, but these are a little bit harder, and I kind of have to think of them like a foundation. Some of these might be around for a couple months, like it's not realistic to hit pan on them in 1 month. But I do have one pan for you today, so why don't I stop talking and show you the eyeshadow that I use most often. So this first one comes from my Lorac Pro 3 palette. It was the shade Canvas. I'll insert clips of what they look like before. Actually, before I show you this eyeshadow, I need to also remind you that my rule for myself is that I'm trying to hit pan on these eyeshadows, or if I use them 20 times, I can roll them out if they're just not working for me. This one I used 26 times over the last month, and I thought I would have pan for you today, and I just do not. I put off filming another 2 days trying to make sure I could hit pan in this daggum shade, and as you can see, we're just not there yet. I don't get it. I literally don't get it, but I do know that I will hit pan on this within this next month. I'm not worried about that. But Lord, if I didn't, I mean, like, I dug in there sometimes trying to hit pan in this and just, But yeah, no pan yet. I have enjoyed using this palette over the past month. I find that it's a really good color scheme for me in the wintertime. So sadly, this one, well, kind of sadly and kind of not sadly, this one will be in another month. Okay, my next most used shade comes from my Truly Madly Deeply palette from Colourpop. I used this one 19 times over the past month, and yet I have no pan in this one too. I have trouble seeing the progress in this. Like, it is just super slow going. I find that this shade isn't super pigmented, and I like pile it on because it doesn't quite build up well either. And yet it still is just not, like, it's not showing much progress. I feel slightly determined though to keep this in at least another month and see if I can't make more of a dip in it. I don't know. This one is turning out not to be a favorite shade in this palette. It's a decent color, but I wish it would build a little bit better than it does. It really doesn't build up depth when you like pile it on top of each other, so that's a little bit of a disappointment. But this color scheme in general has been really nice to use during January, and I think also it will be a nice palette to reach for in February. So I am excited to have this like color scheme around again, but this shade is just a pain in my butt officially as of right now. You probably won't be able to see it very well, but there is a swatch of Canvas right there. This is a swatch of Golden Gate Bridge from the Colourpop palette. Okay, and the third palette that I reached for most frequently was my Sigma Enchanted palette. This one is actually one I put on today, so technically I've worn this one 16 times, and the shade I'm working on is Moonglade right here, and hopefully you can see that I have a pretty decent dip going. I found that this color doesn't really have a ton of pigment in it either, and the way I typically like to use it is as an inner corner shade. I have used it all over my lid, and like I said, it's more of like a really light kind of look, so not something super ideal for an everyday lid shade, but it's not bad. And so I have been using it, like I said, inner corner. And I do think I will keep this in the project, and we'll just keep, or I have to keep it in the project because I haven't used it 20 times yet. But I do think that I'll probably be able to hit pan on this in the long term, hopefully by the next month, but although it might take a little bit longer than that because these pans do feel kind of deep. So I'm gonna keep reaching for this one and see if we can't make some better progress on it. Okay, the next palette is super exciting. This is the Modern Renaissance. I was working on the very dark brown shade. I reached for this palette 15 times last month, and I have to say, like, 15 uses sounds like maybe not as much as some of the other ones, but I would typically use this on my eyes and in my brows. So while I was only reaching for it once, I was using it in multiple ways and therefore using a little bit more product, and hopefully you'll be able to see, but today we have some pan. And you'll also be able to see that you can see the kind of flat brush shape that I was using because it kind of carved out a little bit of like a dent in this palette. So yes, I have pan in my project. This is my first official pan of my Pan This Eyeshadows project. I'm super excited. Also, just in case you were curious, that's the shade swatched out. This was one that I kind of expected to be in longer, but it was such a good brow shade for me that I ended up being able to reach for it way more often. Okay, the last shade to update you on from last month comes from my Dose of Colors Friendcation palette, and it was the shade Try Me, which is that red kind of shimmer in the palette. I have really enjoyed reaching for this over the past month, but as you'll see, I haven't quite hit pan yet. I've only reached for this 10 times, so I probably could do a slightly better job. Although I have to admit, it was a good shade for January and for February, but I found that because the only other shimmer that I have going in this project was so light and it didn't really have much of an impact on my eyes, I tend to reach for this or some other shimmer in my collection. And to be honest, I kind of burnt myself out on the amount of like red and pink shades that I wore last month. Like I wore a lot of them over January, like just a lot. Here's a swatch, but I do have some clips of some eyeshadow like looks that I did, but you'll see that a lot of them look very similar because I didn't have a, like, this isn't the most like variety of a color story. It was an easier color story to use for my first time around. I'm glad to have something this kind of like easy to kind of help me transition in, but granted, over the past month I realized like it's a little bit boring and a lot of my looks ended up looking the same. So I'm kind of crossing my fingers that maybe I can roll in another colorful shimmer this next month. Okay, sorry if the camera's a little bit moved, but I had to go wash my hands. So this is what our color scheme currently looks like. We barely can't even see the canvas shade. So we need to roll a shade in. I think as we get closer to the summer months, I might open up my entire collection to be possibly rolled in. But for now, I'm gonna stick to my spreadsheet and the cool tones only because I really am feeling more cool tone neutral kind of shades for this time of the year. So let me look at my spreadsheet. 213 shadows to choose from. Let's randomly generate. 180 is the next one. Okay, so that shade comes from my Night and Day Revolution Pro palette, and I actually really like this palette for this time of the year, so this is a really nice time for me to pull this, and it's actually this transitional kind of brown shade. Now this is one that I have to kind of build up. Let me find a place to swatch it. That's a swatch of it right there. It's really not gonna be easy for me to hit pan on this guy because it is like an actual baked shade. So what I might do is maybe set a goal. I'm gonna try to hit 20 uses on it, but maybe what I might do is see if I push that to 40 or something and see what we're looking like, but I might not try to hit pan on a baked shade. That sounds like really hard, and I don't really want to do that to myself. So maybe like 20 uses on this guy at first, then we'll see about pushing more uses on it, or maybe I'll perhaps try to reach for 20 other shades in addition to this shade in this palette. Maybe something like that. We'll have to get creative with this goal. But I'm also like, I'm looking at this color palette and I'm like, okay, maybe one more color. Maybe I can work on 6 shades. Let's try rolling in another one. I might be pushing my luck here, but let's just try it. Okay. 24. Okay, that shade actually comes from my Sultry palette, and it's the shade Steampunk, which is a gold shade. So I don't know, let's see. So I ended up swatching it right there. I have a little anxiety when I think about hitting pan in this palette because it is like a limited edition palette, but I don't really have a particular affinity for that shade, and that's part of the reason why I put it in my spreadsheet to begin with. I'm trying to push myself to like use it more. So this one might be one that I will see if I'm comfortable using it 20 times. I'm gonna try to reach for it 20 times. I think that it's a good addition to this. Like, it's nice to have a gold, then I have that purpley lilac inner corner shade, a red. I'm glad to have another shimmer to work on over the next month, even though again I might be pushing my luck with having, you know, 6 shades versus 5 shades. But I'm so close to that canvas shade as well, to hitting pan on it, that I think I'm okay rolling in an extra shade for now. But yeah, officially I'm gonna add this one to the project too, and we'll just see how we do. Okay, so this is what our current color story is gonna look like for February. Not bad, honestly. I'm kind of excited to have added that additional shade. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into the eye looks from last month. If you were only here to see how I did on the shadows, you can bow out now. I very much thank you for watching to this point. And if I'm honest, when I look at my clips from like last month, I'm kind of underwhelmed by a lot of them. They ended up looking very similar. I think I'll start out showing some that featured the shade from the Sigma Enchanted palette, the shade Moonglade. This one again was one that I was trying to figure out more than anything. I was trying to understand, is it a lid shade? Is it an inner corner shade? What are you? In this palette, it's probably one of the least attractive shades to me. It's just not a shade that I typically would reach for. I like all these kind of sparkly, glittery ones, where this one's more of like a true shimmer formula. It's not really like a glitter formula. So I did try it over the top of like some deeper shadows just to kind of lighten it up in the center of my eyelid. I tried it all over my eyelid. I tried it as an inner corner. I think I prefer it mostly as an inner corner shade. And I did wear it a couple times with, I think I pulled in Loam over here, which is a nice kind of cool tone shade. I did pair it with my Lorac Pro Palette a good bit I did reach into Amethyst here and put Amethyst on my inner and outer corner, and then put Loam over the top, or Moonglade over the top, and that ended up being a pretty look. It actually ended up pulling very purple for whatever reason, which that amethyst shade is a little bit more just like a burgundy kind of color. And then I also paired Moonglade with my Cyprus Umber shade in the inner and outer corner, kind of like a halo pop. And I really like the mattes in this palette. They blend really well for me, so I really did enjoy using this deep dark shade as like a halo eye, and this one worked pretty well for that. And then most of my other looks ended up looking very similar. I was surprised again when I look back at it. This one is the Dose Colors Friendcation palette. The red shade in here ends up, I can kind of shear it out and make it look more pink. If I don't wear it over glitter glue or don't use my finger to apply it, it looks more light and more pink, kind of softer. But if I wanted to kind of build it up on my lid, I would use my finger. If I wanted to build it up on the outer corner and kind of use another shade to transition into it, I could do that. But again, even if I played with placement and kind of how intensely I put it down, I still found that like it looked like I was wearing like a pinky red look that day. So it didn't really look that different, which is kind of why I'm like, I'm a little tired of the shade, even though I do think that I can hit pan on it and I do want to keep working on it. I think it'll be so good for February. It was just something that I didn't realize, I didn't get the variety that I normally do. This is going to be a transition or a change for me. I'm normally someone who does not repeat looks, and I did have to wear the same look a couple times on different days just because I couldn't think of anything cool to do. And then occasionally I did reach for my Lorac Pro Palette just because this is a really nice soft color story for like day-to-day use. If I was going to leave the house going grocery shopping or going to the doctor or something like that, then I would kind of reach for this, and then I would use something as an inner corner shade or maybe something on the outer corner just for like a playful pop. But this is such a nice, it's soft palette. And even though like, I don't know, like, I find myself, I realize like I'm not complaining as much about using this palette, whereas this one, I'm like, you look the same. And I'm like, all these shades are so light and they look the same. I don't know why this one gets under my skin. I think maybe I have higher expectations for this palette where I know what this palette is going to get me. Like I know it's very kind of all monotone, it's very neutral kind of palette. But then again, this palette does give me an opportunity to wear like pops color on my lips. I love wearing this palette with a red lip so much. And then occasionally I did reach for this Truly Madly Deeply palette, and I did try to pair it quite often. When I would wear the Dose Colors Friendcation palette, I typically wore this palette as well. I sometimes reached into Sweet Dreams, Blossom, or I think I used Misty or Jackpot one or two times too. Not too often. Mr. Sandman, I know I used one time, but it was just, this is a good color scheme again going into February, so I'm excited to keep using it. Although this shade right here, I don't know when I might hit pan on that, but this thing is, I don't know. It's gonna test me. But yeah, I hope I had time to kind of insert all the clips I have. If I have any additional clips left over, I'll put them at the end of this video. But I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you say hello in the comments. Let me know what you think. Yeah, what do we think? Is this okay to add in a 6th shade? Are you actually, I know some people work on more than 5 shades. Let me know in the comments if you work on more than 5 shades for this project. And that's it. I will see you in the next one. Bye.